My name is Joanna Thornton. I'm 29. At my rehearsal dinner, in front of 12 guests, my mother-in-law asked my mom what she does for a living, and then turned to the entire table and reduced 27 years of work to a punchline. 12 people heard it. 2 of them laughed. One of them was a pastor. Nobody corrected her, including me. My mom didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She said something so quiet and so steady that I almost missed it. And then she changed the subject, because that's what dignity looks like when it's sitting at a table that doesn't deserve it. 3 weeks later, my mother-in-law needed help. The kind of help you can't buy with status or pride. And the name at the top of the recommended list, the only person qualified within 30 miles, belonged to the woman she'd just mocked in front of everyone who mattered. Before I tell you what happened at that door, take a second to like and subscribe, only if you genuinely want to hear the rest. Drop a comment with your location and local time. Let me take you back to that Friday night in April, the night before my wedding, at a restaurant in Millbrook, North Carolina. My mother's name is Diane Thornton, and she has been a home health aide for 27 years. She raised me alone. My father died in a construction accident when I was 11. Scaffold collapse, closed casket. Mom was 30 and had a daughter who wouldn't eat for 3 days after the funeral. She went back to work on the 4th day because the electric bill doesn't grieve. Here's what a home health aide does. Not what Beverly Ashford thinks they do, what they actually do. Mom wakes up at 5, drives 40 minutes to her patient's home, checks vitals, blood pressure, oxygen, temperature, administers medications, performs physical therapy exercises, prepares meals that match dietary restrictions down to the sodium milligram, bathes patients who can't lift their own arms, changes wound dressings, monitors for infection. When I was 9, she used to bring me along on Saturday shifts because she couldn't afford a sitter. I'd sit in the living room doing homework while Mom held the hand of a woman named Mrs. Abel, an Alzheimer's patient who forgot her own children's names but remembered every word to Moon River. Mom sang it with her, every Saturday, for 6 years, until Mrs. Abel died in her sleep, with my mother sitting 3 feet away. Crestview Home Care is the largest home health agency in a 3-county region of central North Carolina. My mother is their highest-rated caregiver, 5 stars on every patient review for 11 consecutive years. She has certifications in stroke rehabilitation, dementia care, wound management, and fall prevention. She has never once been ashamed of what she does. "Not everyone can do this work, Joanna," she told me once, folding her scrubs at the kitchen table. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I believed her. I still do. But believing something and defending it when it matters, those are 2 different things. I dated Marcus Ashford for 4 years before the wedding. He's a civil engineer, quiet, steady, the kind of man who double-checks load calculations and worries about bridge inspections on his day off. I loved him the first time he fixed my kitchen faucet and then apologized for the water stain on the counter. His mother, Beverly, was polite in the beginning. The kind of polite that takes you 6 months to realize is conditional. The first dinner at the Ashford house, she introduced me to a neighbor as Marcus's little girlfriend. We'd been together 2 years and engaged for 3 months. She asked where my mother went to school. She asked if our family owned or rented. She pointed to Marcus's diploma on the wall, NC State, back civil engineering, and said, "Do teachers still need a master's degree?" With her head tilted, the way you'd ask a child how their finger painting went. Marcus would squeeze my hand in the car after. "She's old-fashioned, babe. She'll warm up." 4 years. She never warmed up. But here's the thing I didn't catch until much later. Beverly never asked my mother what she did for a living. Not once in 4 years of holidays, birthday dinners, and engagement parties. She'd talk to Diane about the weather, about gardening, about whether the potato salad needed more mustard. Surface things, safe things. She steered around the question like a driver who already knows where the pothole is. Looking back, I think she always knew. She'd heard it from Marcus, or she'd looked it up, or someone told her at one of her book club meetings. As she knew exactly what my mother did. She was just waiting for the right audience. Magnolia Grove is the nicest restaurant in Millbrook, which means cloth napkins and a wine list that goes past $15. Beverly booked the private room. Her treat, she said. Generous, strategic. 12 people at a long table. Beverly's side. Herself, Marcus's two aunts, Carolyn and June, two of Beverly's book club friends, and a couple from her neighborhood, the Prestons. My side. Mom, her best friend Linda, my maid of honor Meg, and Pastor Jim Whitley, who would officiate the wedding. Beverly arranged the seating. She put herself at the head. Marcus and I sat in the middle. Mom was at the far end, between Linda and an empty chair. I noticed. I didn't say anything. The first hour went fine. Toasts, laughter. Marcus's Aunt June cried a little when she talked about watching him grow up. Pastor Jim told a story about a couple he married 40 years ago who still hold hands at church. Beverly ordered a second bottle of wine for the table. Mom wore a navy blue dress with pearl buttons. I knew she'd saved for 3 months to buy it. I'd seen the layaway receipt on her kitchen counter in January. She looked beautiful, straight-backed, smiling like a woman who belonged there, because she did. Then dessert came, and Beverly started making the rounds. She pulled up a chair next to each person, chatted, laughed, touched their arm. Working the room the way she always did, gracious hostess, center of gravity. She saved my mother for last. Beverly pulled out the chair next to Diane, sat down, crossed her legs, and smiled. So Diane, she said, loud enough for the table to hear. I don't think I've ever asked, what exactly do you do for a living? My stomach dropped, not because of the question, because of the smile. My mother set down her fork, folded her hands on her lap, and I watched her do the thing she's done 10,000 times in 27 years, of walking into rooms where no one thinks she belongs. She met it head on. I'm a home health aide, Mom said, calm, clear. Have been for 27 years. Beverly didn't look at Mom when she answered. She turned to the table, all 12 faces, and raised her eyebrows like she'd just heard something amusing. Oh, Beverly said. So you clean up after people for money. The room stopped. Linda put her knife down. Pastor Jim looked at his plate. Aunt Carolyn pressed her lips together. Aunt June covered her mouth with her napkin, but I heard the laugh behind it. Beverly's friend Marlene let out a small high sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a giggle. The Prestons looked at each other. Marcus's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed. I squeezed back so hard my knuckles went white. Mom smiled. Not a weak smile, not a polite smile. The smile of a woman who has heard this sentence in 10 different forms from 10 different people across 3 decades of doing work most human beings won't last a week in. Someone has to, Mom said. Beverly laughed. She reached over and patted Mom's shoulder, the kind of pat you give a golden retriever. Well, at least you're honest about it. She stood up, straightened her blouse, and walked back to her seat at the head of the table. Mom's hand found mine under the tablecloth. She squeezed once. Gentle, steady. Don't, not tonight. I listened. I sat there with 12 witnesses and a mouthful of words I didn't say, and I listened to my mother tell me to stand down on the worst night of her year. That's the part I still can't forgive myself for. The rest of the dinner lasted another 40 minutes. It felt like 4 hours. Mom finished her water. She laughed at Pastor Jim's stories. She complimented the crème brûlée. She did every single thing a person does when they've decided that the people at this table will not see them break. She didn't eat another bite. I watched the dessert plate sit untouched in front of her for 20 minutes. She moved the spoon once, so it looked like she'd tried it. Marcus leaned toward my ear. I'm sorry, I'll talk to her. When? I whispered. After dessert? He didn't answer. Pastor Jim, a man who's been running a congregation for 30 years and can read a room the way my mother reads a blood pressure chart, pulled his chair closer to Mom and asked about her work. Genuinely. Tell me about your patients, Diane. What's the longest you've cared for someone? Mom told him about Mrs. Abel. 6 years, the Alzheimer's, the singing. The way Mrs. Abel's son cried at the funeral and told Diane, You gave my mother 6 more years of feeling like herself. Pastor Jim set his hand on the table near my mother's. That's ministry, Diane, he said. That's real ministry. At the head of the table, Beverly was laughing with Marlene about a cruise she was planning. She didn't look down our direction once. When the valet brought the cars around, Beverly kissed Marcus on the cheek, shook my hand, and said, "Lovely evening. I see you at the altar." She walked past my mother without a word, not even a nod. Mom stood on the sidewalk in her pearl-button dress, watching Beverly's Lexus pull away, and I realized something that made my throat close. Beverly hadn't forgotten what she said. She simply didn't think it required an afterthought. The car ride home was 11 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock the entire time. Neither of us spoke until mile 6. "Mom," my voice cracked. "I should have—" "You did exactly right," she said, staring out the passenger window. "Tomorrow is your wedding. That's what matters." "It's not all that matters." "Tonight it is." I gripped the steering wheel. Mom's hands were folded on her purse, the same way she folds them on her lap when a patient's family member says something cruel about the care she provides, and she has to be professional because the patient still needs her at 6 a.m. I'd watched her do it my entire life. I just never realized I was watching a woman hold herself together. We pulled into her driveway. The porch light was on. She always leaves it on, even though she lives alone, because she says an empty house shouldn't look empty. She got out, walked around to my window, and leaned in, hugged me through the open frame. "You are marrying a good man, Joanna. His mother is his mother. You are my daughter. Those are separate things." She kissed my forehead, walked up the steps, waved from the door, went inside. I sat in the driveway with the engine running for 3 full minutes. I was shaking. Not from sadness, from rage. My mother had just been called a maid in front of 12 people on the night before my wedding, and she was the one comforting me. I was about to pull away when I glanced at the kitchen window. The light was on. Mom was sitting at the table, alone. She was crying. It was the first time I'd seen my mother cry since my father's funeral 18 years ago. I almost went back inside. I should have gone back inside. Instead, I drove home and married Marcus the next morning. The wedding was beautiful. 70 guests, white chairs on a lawn, dogwood trees in bloom. April in North Carolina, warm enough for bare arms, cool enough that nobody sweats through their suit. Mom wore a navy blue A-line, different from the rehearsal dress. She sat in the front row on my side, back straight, chin up, with a single tissue folded in her palm. She didn't use it until the vows. Beverly wore cream satin, not white. She knew exactly where the line was, but close enough that 3 people asked me later if she'd done it on purpose. We didn't do a father-daughter dance. We did a mother-daughter dance instead. Mom and I swayed to "What a Wonderful World" in front of 70 people, and for 3 minutes, Beverly Ashford and her rehearsal dinner didn't exist. Mom held me the same way she held me the night Dad died. One hand on my back, one hand on the back of my head, and I heard her whisper, "Your father would be so proud of you." Beverly watched from her table. She didn't clap when the song ended. During the reception, I overheard her talking to the Prestons. "Lovely ceremony. A bit simple for my taste." She said it the way you'd review a restaurant. Polite, distant, already composing the 3-star rating. Marcus's toast, he mentioned Diane by name. "I want to thank Diane Thornton, my mother-in-law, for raising the most extraordinary woman I've ever met." Half the room clapped. Beverly's smile tightened at the corners, and she lifted her champagne glass without drinking from it. The wedding was beautiful, but weddings end. And what comes after? That's the real marriage. Not just to Marcus, to his entire family. The next 3 weeks proved that. 2 weeks after the wedding, Beverly invited us to Sunday dinner. "Just close family," she said on the phone to Marcus. Nothing fancy. Her living room had fresh flowers on every surface. She'd made pot roast with a recipe she told us twice she'd found in Southern Living. She introduced me to a neighbor who'd stopped by to return a casserole dish. "This is Joanna," Beverly said. "She teaches little ones, Third grade, isn't it? Her voice hit that pitch, the one that sounds warm until you listen for the blade underneath. I love my job, I said. Of course you do. She patted my arm. And Marcus makes enough for both of you, so there's no pressure. I let that one pass. Dinner, pot roast, be civil. After the meal, clearing plates, I asked, Beverly, when should we have Mom over for a family dinner? She didn't look up from the dish she was drying. Oh, it's just close family for these, dear. I'm sure your mother understands. She is close family. She's my mother. Beverly set the dish down carefully, turned, smiled. Of course. Next time, maybe. There was never a next time. Over the following weeks, Diane's name didn't come up at the Ashford table. Beverly planned a 4th of July barbecue, extended family, neighbors, book club friends, and the invitation list didn't include my mother. When I asked Marcus about it, he said he'd handle it. When I asked Beverly directly, she said, The guest list is already finalized, Joanna. We simply don't have the space. Her backyard holds 40 people. There were going to be 20. My mother never asked why she wasn't invited. She never brought it up. That's the thing about people with real dignity. They don't beg for a seat at a table that doesn't want them. They just stop expecting the invitation. I ran into Marcus's Aunt Carolyn at the Harris Teeter on a Tuesday morning. She was in the cereal aisle, and she had the face of a woman who'd been carrying something she needed to put down. Joanna, can I talk to you a second? We stood between the Cheerios and the granola, and Carolyn told me what her sister had been saying at book club. Beverly told them Marcus married someone from a working family. She said your mother's job is, how did she put it, not exactly what she'd envisioned for the Ashford family. Carolyn looked at the floor. I should have said something to her. I didn't. I'm telling you now because you deserve to know. My hands were shaking when I gripped the shopping cart. I thanked Carolyn. I paid for my groceries. I drove home. That night, I told Marcus, word for word. He leaned back on the couch and ran both hands through his hair. I'll talk to her. You said that 3 weeks ago. What do you want me to do, Joe? You cut her off? I want you to tell her my mother deserves respect. In the same room. In front of the same people. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Beverly. I could hear Beverly through the speaker from across the room. Her voice went high and watery inside 10 seconds. I never said anything cruel, Marcus. Carolyn misunderstood. You know how she gets. I was just making conversation. Marcus closed his eyes. He told her to be more careful. He told her Joanna was upset. He hung up and said, She says it was a misunderstanding. I looked at him. He looked at the wall. He wanted to believe her. Or maybe he just wanted this to be someone else's problem. Either way, it was easier than the truth. Beverly called Marcus on a Thursday. I know because he went out to the garage to take it. And when he came back, he looked like a man who'd been handed a map with no roads on it. My mom thinks... He stopped, sat down, started over. She's worried about the kind of environment we'd be raising kids in. She said that. She said Dad worked his whole life so I could have more. Gerald was a plumber, Marcus. He fixed pipes. He would have respected my mother. Marcus didn't respond to that. Instead, he said the thing I'd been dreading. Do you think maybe your mom is being a bit sensitive about all this? I stood up from the kitchen table. My chair scraped the floor so loud the dog flinched. Sensitive? She smiled when your mother called her a maid in front of 12 people. She held my hand under the table and told me to stay calm. On the night before my wedding. If anyone in this story is the least sensitive person alive, it's Diane Thornton. We slept in separate rooms that night, first time since the honeymoon. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Marcus on the phone in the kitchen. I stood in the hallway and listened. Diane, I'm sorry. What I said last night about you being sensitive, that was wrong. That wasn't fair. Silence. Then my mother's voice, tinny through the speaker. Honey, I don't need anyone to fight for me. Just don't let her change who you are. Marcus hung up. He saw me standing in the doorway. His eyes were red. She forgave me in 10 seconds, he said. I don't deserve that. No, I said. You don't. But she's going to give it to you anyway. That's the difference between her and your mother. I called Beverly the next afternoon. I sat on the edge of my bed, pressed my feet flat against the floor, and made my voice as level as foundation concrete. Beverly, I need you to stop speaking about my mother behind her back. She has done nothing to deserve it. 3 seconds of silence. I counted. I see, Beverly said. Her voice went cold and dry, like paper left in the sun. So this is what my son married into. Someone who calls to lecture her mother-in-law. I'm not lecturing, I'm asking. You're telling, there's a difference. And in my family, daughters-in-law don't tell mothers anything. She hung up. I heard the click in my sternum. 14 minutes later, Marcus's phone rang. I was close enough to hear Beverly's voice through the case. Your wife just called to threaten me, Marcus. I was so upset I had to sit down. Is this what our family has become? I can't even speak freely without being policed? I watched Marcus's face, and he held the phone slightly away from his ear, the way you hold something too hot. Mom, she didn't threaten. She told me to stop talking, in my own home, on my own telephone. Marcus looked at me. I looked back. I did not help him. He spent 20 minutes trying to calm her down. When he hung up, he sat on the couch with his elbows on his knees and said nothing for a long time. She flipped it, I said. I set a boundary, and she turned it into an attack on herself. Marcus rubbed his face. I know. So what happens now? He didn't answer. Neither did I. We both just sat there in a house that felt smaller than it had that morning. Then something happened that changed everything. Not because anyone planned it. Because the body doesn't wait for convenient timing. I need to pause here for a second. When Beverly hung up that phone, and I sat on my bed and realized something. I'd done the right thing, and she'd made me the villain for it. I set a boundary, and she rewrote the story so that I was the aggressor and she was the victim. If you've ever drawn a line with someone and had them convince everyone you were the unreasonable one, tell me in the comments, how did you handle it? And if you're still here, hit that like button because the next part is where everything shifts. The following Saturday, I drove over to Mom's house for lunch. She was at the kitchen table with a 3-ring binder open and a highlighter in her hand. What's all this? Re-certification, she said, flipping a page. Stroke rehabilitation care. Crestview requires it every 2 years. I sat down across from her and picked up a loose sheet. Diagrams of the brain. Sections labeled ischemic, hemorrhagic, transient. Notes in Mom's handwriting along the margins. Clean, precise, the kind of notes a surgeon would recognize. Post-stroke patients need specialized attention, Mom said without looking up. Swallowing therapy, fall prevention, early detection of secondary events. Most aides aren't trained for it. I am. How many aides at Crestview have this certification? In our 3-county area, 2, me and a woman in Raleigh who's about to retire. I quizzed her from the study guide while we ate turkey sandwiches. I'd ask about warning signs for a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke, and she'd answer before I finished the question. Sudden numbness, slurred speech, vision loss in one eye, confusion, difficulty swallowing. What's the response window? You call 911 immediately. Every minute counts. Brain tissue doesn't wait. She closed the binder and stacked it with 3 others on the counter. 27 years of continuing education. Certifications renewed, skills sharpened, knowledge updated. The same woman Beverly Ashford reduced to cleaning up after people could identify a stroke faster than most people could dial their doctor's office. Before I left, Mom mentioned one more thing. Crestview just renewed their contract with Blue Cross for the Tri-County area. Only agency in the region with certified stroke care staff on the roster. I nodded and kissed her goodbye. I didn't think anything of it. Just my mom being my mom, always studying, always prepared. I had no idea how soon that preparation would matter. The next Sunday dinner at Beverly's, And I noticed something on the kitchen counter I hadn't seen before. A prescription bottle. Large, orange. The label faced away, but when Beverly stepped into the dining room to adjust a place setting, I tilted my head just enough to read it. Amlodipine, 10 milligrams, for high blood pressure, a high dose. Beverly came back, saw me near the counter, and swept the bottle into a drawer with one motion. Everyone my age takes something, she said. It's nothing. Over dinner, Marcus brought it up carefully. Mom, Dr. Peters called me last week. He said your blood pressure's been elevated for months. He wants you to come in for a follow-up. Beverly cut her steak. I don't need doctors telling me how to live, Marcus. I've been managing just fine. He said if you don't get it under control, I said I'm fine. The knife hit the plate hard enough to ring. Marcus stopped talking. I watched Beverly's face, flushed deeper than the wine could explain. Her hand trembled slightly when she lifted her glass. Tiny things, the kind of things you catch only if someone has trained you to look for them. I didn't say anything. If I mentioned her health, Beverly would take it as another intrusion, another lecture, another reason to tell Marcus that his wife overstepped. So I ate my green beans and said nothing. Driving home, Marcus stared at the road. Her doctor called me, he said quietly. Not just about the blood pressure. He said if she keeps ignoring this, the stress, the diet, the medication compliance, she's at high risk for a stroke. He paused. Those were his exact words. High risk. I put my hand on his knee. I didn't say what I was thinking, which was, your mother has been carrying stress and anger like a second skeleton for 30 years. The body keeps a record even when the mind refuses to. Tuesday, lunch break at school. I sat in my classroom with the lights off and a turkey wrap going cold on my desk while I called Mom. Marcus's mother has high blood pressure, I said, high-dose medication. Her doctor is worried. Mom was quiet for a moment, then, has she had any numbness, trouble finding words, sudden headaches? I don't know. She barely speaks to me anymore. Joanna, listen. If anything happens, any sudden symptoms, make sure she gets to a hospital within the first hour. That's the window. After that, options start closing. Mom, why are you telling me this? You don't even like her. I heard her exhale. The sound of a woman who's spent 27 years putting patients before personal feelings. So many times it's not even a choice anymore. It's just how she's wired. I don't have to like her, Mom said. That's not how this works. I sat with that sentence after we hung up, rolled it around in my head while my third graders came back from recess, loud and sandy and completely unconcerned with the weight of adult grudges. My mother had just given me emergency medical guidance for a woman who'd called her a maid in front of 12 people. She didn't hesitate. She didn't add a disclaimer. She didn't say, well, she deserves whatever happens. She gave me the information because that's who she is, a caregiver. On the clock and off it. Beverly, meanwhile, I couldn't bring herself to say my mother's name at a dinner table. That's the gap. That's the whole distance between these two women. One who takes care of people she doesn't like, and one who can't respect the person who takes care of people for a living. 11 days later, I got the call. Memorial Day weekend. Beverly hosted a barbecue. Marcus had insisted, firmly, for the first time in our marriage, that Diane be invited. Beverly agreed the way she agrees to everything she plans to undermine, with a smile and a, how lovely. 20-some people in the backyard, neighbors, book club friends, extended family, burgers on the grill, cooler full of sweet tea, a Bluetooth speaker playing Motown from the patio. Beverly made introductions. She went person by person around the yard, giving everyone their full title. This is Dr. Simmons, our family dentist. This is Margaret. She runs the Arts Council. This is Frank Preston. He just retired from the bank. She got to my mother. And this is Diane. She's Joanna's mother. She helps old people at their homes. 27 years of medical certifications compressed into 8 words. Mom held her plastic cup of lemonade and said nothing. Marlene, Beverly's closest friend, the same woman who'd half laughed at the rehearsal dinner, asked Mom a follow-up. What exactly does that involve, Diane? Mom started to explain. Stroke rehabilitation, wound care, medication management, fall prevention protocols. I watched Marlene's eyebrows rise as my mother described the clinical detail of what she does every day. Beverly stepped in before Mom finished. Marlene, Diane's being modest. She basically cleans houses and keeps company. Beverly touched Mom's elbow. It's very sweet. Small laughter from Beverly's circle. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make the air taste like the rehearsal dinner all over again. Linda, Mom's best friend, a woman who does not suffer fools, stood up from her lawn chair. Diane is a certified medical caregiver, Linda said. Stroke and dementia specialization. She saved lives. I've watched her do it. Beverly's smile didn't flicker. How lovely. Who wants more potato salad? She walked away. Mom set her cup down on the picnic table and didn't pick it up again. An hour later, inside the kitchen, just Beverly, me, and Aunt Carolyn loading plates into the dishwasher. Beverly thought it was safe, family only, no witnesses who mattered. As she pulled off her oven mitts and said it like she was reading from a grocery list. I told Marcus before the wedding. He could do better. A teacher and a maid's daughter. She shook her head. The Ashfords have standards, Joanna. We've never married down. Carolyn stopped moving. I could hear the barbecue through the window, people laughing, someone calling for more ice. And here, in this kitchen, Beverly Ashford was saying out loud what she'd been whispering for months. Your mother is a nice woman, Beverly continued. But let's not pretend her job is anything special. Anyone can do it. I set the plate down on the counter, carefully. Because if I held it 1 second longer, I would have thrown it. Anyone? I said. Can you, Beverly? Can you turn a stroke patient every 2 hours so they don't get bed sores? Can you clear an airway? Can you hold someone's hand while they're dying and then drive home and cook dinner for your 11-year-old daughter? Beverly's chin lifted. Don't you dare raise your voice in my house. I'm not raising my voice. My hands were steady. My pulse was not. I'm asking you a question. She didn't answer. She looked at Carolyn, who looked at the floor. Then Beverly picked up her oven mitts, said, I think the burgers need checking, and walked out the back door. Carolyn exhaled. Joanna. Don't, I said. Not right now. I stood alone in Beverly Ashford's kitchen, surrounded by her china and her copper pots and her framed Better Homes covers, and I thought, this woman has no idea what's about to happen, neither did I. But life has a way of answering questions that people refuse to. The car ride home from the barbecue was the quietest 10 miles of my marriage. Marcus gripped the wheel at 10 and 2. I sat with my arms crossed, staring at the road. 5 minutes in, he spoke first. Joe, she's my mother. And Diane is mine. Which one of them got humiliated today? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Both things can be true. She can be wrong and still be my mother. Then act like it. Tell her it's wrong, not to me, to her. In front of the same people who heard her say it. You're asking me to embarrass her. She embarrassed my mother twice, in public, with an audience. I'm asking you to correct the record. Marcus didn't promise. He didn't deflect. For the first time since the rehearsal dinner, he said the words I'd been waiting to hear. You're right. What she said about your mom, at the dinner, is today, it's not okay. It was never okay. I looked at him. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet. I'll talk to her, he said. This week. For real this time. I'll sit her down and tell her that Diane is family, and if she can't treat her with basic respect, then we have a problem. Thank you. Don't thank me. I should have done it 6 months ago. He reached for my hand. I gave it to him. That conversation was on a Sunday. Marcus planned to visit Beverly on Wednesday after work. He'd rehearsed what he wanted to say. I heard him practicing in the shower Tuesday night, the way he used to practice presentations for his engineering firm. He never made it to Wednesday. On Tuesday afternoon, at 2:14 p.m., my phone buzzed in the middle of a spelling lesson. Marcus. Mom had a stroke. Millbrook Memorial. It's bad. I asked my co-teacher to cover my class. I drove to Millbrook Memorial in 14 minutes. I don't remember a single stoplight. Marcus was in the ER waiting area, elbows on knees, still wearing his hard hat from the job site. His face was gray. What happened? Her neighbor found her on the kitchen floor. She'd been trying to make lunch, dropped a pan, couldn't get up, couldn't speak. When? About an hour ago. The neighbor called 911 at 1:15. They got her here by 1:40. 45 minutes. Inside the window. Mom's voice in my head. If anything happens, make sure she gets to a hospital within the first hour. Beverly had made it. Barely. The ER doctor came out 20 minutes later. Young, calm, the kind of calm that comes from saying hard things 100 times. Ischemic stroke, right hemisphere. She's lost motor function on her left side, arm, leg, partial facial paralysis. Speech is significantly impaired. Marcus grabbed my hand. Is she going to recover? With rehabilitation, there's a chance she'll regain partial function, but she's going to need long-term in-home care. 3 to 6 months minimum, possibly longer. The doctor gave us a packet, forms, instructions, a list of approved providers. Marcus opened it with shaking hands. Her insurance covers in-home rehabilitation through contracted agencies, the doctor said. The social worker will walk you through the options. I looked at the first page, a list of approved home care agencies covered by Beverly's Blue Cross plan in the Tri-County area. The first name on the list was Crestview Home Care. I closed the folder, sat down, and stared at a water stain on the ceiling tiles, while the world rearranged itself around a fact that was so simple, it almost seemed made up. The woman Beverly mocked was about to become the woman Beverly needed. Marcus called Crestview the next morning from Beverly's hospital room. I was there. Beverly was asleep, sedated, left side motionless, a thin line of drool on the pillow that a nurse wiped every 20 minutes. I listened to Marcus explain the situation to the scheduler. Ischemic stroke, right hemisphere, needs in-home rehabilitation, swallowing therapy, physical therapy, daily care. The scheduler asked, does she require stroke-specialized rehabilitation? Yes. Let me check our roster for your zip code. Pause. Keyboard sounds. We have one certified stroke rehabilitation specialist available in your service area. I'll assign her to the case. Marcus's phone buzzed with the confirmation email. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at me. You've got to be kidding me. I took the phone. The assignment read, Caregiver, Diane M. Thornton, CNA. Certification, Stroke Rehabilitation, Dementia Care, Wound Management. Patient rating, 5.0, 11 consecutive years. Marcus called back immediately. Is there someone else? Anyone else? The scheduler, Ruth Calloway, Diane's supervisor, was direct. Mr. Ashford, Diane Thornton is the highest-rated caregiver on our staff. She's also the only aide with stroke rehabilitation certification within a 30-mile radius. If you want to request a transfer from our Raleigh office, the wait is 2 to 3 weeks. Marcus rubbed his eyes. We can't wait 3 weeks. Then Diane starts Monday. He hung up. Though we sat in the hospital room, listening to the beep of Beverly's heart monitor, and Marcus said, I have to call Diane. He dialed. I watched his face as it rang. Diane, it's Marcus. I know this is awkward. You don't have to do this. My mother's voice, steady as a level. Is she getting the care she needs right now? No. Then I'll be there Monday morning. Sunday night. I drove to Mom's house. She was in the living room, packing her medical bag on the coffee table the way a soldier packs a kit. Everything in its place, nothing extra, nothing missing. Blood pressure cuff, stethoscope, disposable gloves, 3 sizes, swallowing therapy cards, range of motion exercise guides, pressure sore prevention cream, wound dressing supplies, a small notebook with a blue pen clipped to the cover. Mom, I stood in the doorway. She called you a maid, in front of everyone, twice. You don't owe her a single thing. Diane zipped the blood pressure cuff into its pouch, didn't look up. You're right. I don't owe her anything. Then why are you doing this? She stopped packing, straightened up, looked at me with the same steady eyes that have looked at 100 families sitting in 100 living rooms asking why their parent won't eat, why their mother doesn't remember their name, why the bruises won't heal. The woman who had a stroke, the one who can't feed herself right now, she's not the same person who said those things at that dinner. She is the same person, Mom. Maybe. Diane closed the bag, snapped the clasps. But I'm also the same person, and this is what I do. She lifted the bag off the table, tested the weight, set it by the front door. I'm not going there for her, Joanna. I'm going because if I don't, I'm not the person I've told you I am for 27 years. I hugged her in the hallway. She smelled like laundry detergent and the cocoa butter lotion she's used since I was a kid. She held me for 10 seconds, then pulled back and said, Go home. Kiss Marcus. I'll see you after my shift tomorrow. I drove home in the dark and thought, Beverly Ashford has no idea what's about to walk into her house. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Marcus opened the front door of Beverly's house. Diane stepped inside wearing her Crestview uniform, navy blue scrubs, white sneakers, her name badge clipped to the left pocket, medical bag in her right hand. 27 years of training behind her eyes. At the hospital bed had been set up in the living room, the same room where Beverly used to host her book club, where the Ashford family portrait hung above the mantel in a gilded frame. Beverly in the center of that photograph, hands folded, chin high, the queen of everything she surveyed. The Beverly in the bed was someone else. Left side of her face slack, left arm resting on a pillow, motionless. Her right hand gripped the blanket like a rope over a cliff. She saw Diane. Her eyes went wide. She tried to speak. The words came out bent, half-formed. No, not her. Diane set her bag on the side table, washed her hands at the kitchen sink, pulled on gloves, walked to the bedside with the same measured pace she walks into every patient's home, calm, certain, unhurried. Good morning, Mrs. Ashford. I'm Diane. Your assigned caregiver from Crestview Home Care. I'll be here Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. She opened her bag and pulled out the blood pressure cuff. Let's start with your vitals. Beverly turned her face toward the wall. Diane placed the cuff on her right arm, inflated it, read the numbers, and wrote them in her notebook. Beverly didn't resist. She couldn't. Marcus stood in the doorway. I know because he called me that night and described it, his voice cracking the way it hadn't since the hospital. He wasn't crying because his mother had a stroke. He was crying because he'd just watched Diane Thornton do exactly what Beverly said she did, take care of someone. And for the first time, he understood it wasn't small. The first week was war without weapons. Beverly refused to eat when Diane cooked. Diane placed the meal on the bedside table and left the room. 30 minutes later, the plate was clean. Beverly pressed the call button every 10 minutes. Water, but colder. A different pillow. The blinds open. The blinds closed. The television on. The television off. She couldn't walk, couldn't dress herself, couldn't brush her own teeth. But she could still try to make Diane jump. Diane jumped, every single time, without irritation, without sighing, without the smallest flicker of resentment crossing her face. She adjusted the blinds and brought the water and fluffed the pillow as though each request was the first one she'd received all day. On Wednesday, Beverly told Marcus she wanted a different caregiver. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed and said, Mom, she's the only one qualified within 30 miles. Unless you want to go to a rehab facility. Beverly's jaw tightened. She didn't mention it again. Friday afternoon, Diane filed her first weekly report. I saw it because Marcus showed me, expecting commentary or anger or vindication. Here's what it said. Patient resistant to initial therapy. Recommend continued daily swallowing exercises and gentle range of motion work. Blood pressure trending downward. 148/92. Improvement from admission. Adjusting daily schedule to accommodate patient preference for morning vitals. Will reassess therapy compliance next week. Professional, clinical. Not a single personal word. Not a hint of history. Not a trace of the rehearsal dinner, or the barbecue, or the word maid, or the 2 pats on the shoulder. I read it twice. Then I handed the phone back to Marcus and said, "That's my mother." He nodded. "Oh, I know." My mother was treating the woman who humiliated her the same way she treats every patient who's ever pushed her call button, with competence so complete it doesn't need commentary. And somehow, that was the most powerful thing she could have done. I know what some of you are thinking right now. Why? Why would my mother do this? Why not say, "Find someone else, Beverly"? Trust me, I asked her the same thing. But my mom taught me something I'm still learning. The way you treat the people who hurt you says more about you than it ever says about them. If that makes sense to you, subscribe. Because the next part is when Beverly starts to understand it too. By the third week, the silences between them changed. Not friendly, not warm. But the edge was gone from Beverly's voice when she said Diane in the morning. And she stopped pressing the call button as a power play. She started pressing it only when she needed something. Diane ran swallowing therapy every day at 10 a.m. She'd sit beside the bed with a small cup of thickened water and a set of flashcards showing tongue positions. Beverly would try, cheeks hollow with effort, eyes wet with frustration, and Diane would wait. If Beverly choked, Diane wiped her chin, steadied her shoulders, and said, "Again, you've got this." Week 3, Diane found something during the daily skin check. A pressure sore forming on Beverly's left heel. Stage 1. Redness that didn't blanch. Diane documented it, repositioned Beverly's leg on a foam wedge, applied a barrier cream, and adjusted the turning schedule from every 3 hours to every 2. Most people don't catch these until stage 2, the visiting nurse told Marcus during a check-in. Your mother's aide caught it early. That probably saved her from a wound that takes months to heal. Marcus called me after. The nurse said Mom's care is exceptional, best she's seen in years. Week 4. Diane was helping Beverly with range of motion exercises, holding her left hand, bending each finger slowly, stretching the tendons that hadn't moved on their own since the stroke. Beverly looked down at their hands, her hand in Diane's. The woman she'd mocked, holding her fingers with the gentleness of someone who's done this 10,000 times and still believes it matters. Beverly spoke, halting, slow, her best sentence since the stroke. "Thank you." Small, reluctant, but real. Diane didn't flinch, didn't celebrate, didn't pause. She bent the next finger and said, "Same time tomorrow, Beverly. Same time every day." Week 5, Wednesday, 11:20 in the morning. Diane was running swallowing therapy when Beverly stopped mid-sentence. Not a pause, a stop. Her left eye closed. Her right hand, which had been holding the therapy cup, went limp. The cup hit the mattress and rolled. Diane didn't freeze. She moved the way a surgeon moves when the monitor flatlines, with speed that looks like calm because panic has been trained out of it. She checked Beverly's responsiveness. "Beverly, Beverly, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand." No squeeze. Diane positioned her on her side, checked the airway, grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "This is Diane Thornton, certified home health aide, patient ID 4721. I have a 62-year-old female post-ischemic stroke presenting with sudden loss of consciousness, left eye ptosis, and right side flaccidity. Onset approximately 90 seconds ago. I believe this is a TIA, requesting immediate transport." She hung up and monitored Beverly's breathing, counted the seconds, documented the exact time of onset in her notebook. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. They found Diane with 2 fingers on Beverly's radial pulse, a blood pressure reading already logged, and a timeline of symptoms written on a sticky note attached to the stretcher rail. The lead paramedic read the note. Who identified the TIA? I did. Are you a nurse? I'm a home health aide. He looked at Diane for a long moment. You probably just saved her from a full secondary stroke. At the hospital, the neurologist confirmed it. A transient ischemic attack, a warning shot from a brain still healing. If the response had been delayed by 15 minutes, Beverly likely would have lost her ability to speak permanently. Marcus called me from the hospital hallway. His voice was shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Your mom just saved my mom's life, Joanna. And for the first time in our marriage, I heard Marcus Ashford cry. That evening, our front porch, 2 rocking chairs and the sound of crickets. Marcus sat with his hands between his knees, staring at the lawn. I rocked beside him and waited. Some conversations need to arrive on their own schedule. She called your mom a maid, Marcus said. And your mom just saved her life. I didn't respond. He didn't need me to. I should have said something at that dinner. And I should have stood up when she said it at the barbecue. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, that mom was just being mom, that it would blow over. He rubbed his face with both hands. It was that bad. I know. How do I fix this? I stopped rocking, looked at him. You don't fix it. You start different. He nodded slowly. I need to tell your mother, not just apologize. Tell her what I should have said months ago. At the dinner, at the barbecue, every time I sat there and let it happen. I think she'd appreciate that. And I need to talk to Mom. He leaned back. The chair creaked. Not about the stroke, about what she did, about who Diane is. Because if my mother can lie in that bed and still not understand the kind of person who's taking care of her, then I need to be the one to say it out loud. I reached over and held his hand. Tell your mother first. She needs to hear it from you. Marcus looked at me. In the porch light, I could see the boy his mother raised. Kind, cautious, loyal, finally catching up to the man he needed to become. And Pastor Jim was right, Marcus said quietly. What your mom does, it is ministry. He went to see Beverly the next afternoon, alone. Marcus told me about it that night. Every word. Beverly was sitting up when he arrived, not in the hospital bed anymore, but in a wheelchair by the window. Her left hand rested on the armrest, fingers curling and uncurling in the slow rhythm Diane had been practicing with her every morning for a month. Marcus pulled a chair in front of her, close, face to face. Mom, I need to say something, and I need you to listen. Beverly's mouth tightened. She started to speak, the same defensive posture she'd worn like armor for 62 years. But Marcus held up his hand. Please, she stopped. At the rehearsal dinner, you humiliated Diane in front of 12 people. At the barbecue, you did it again. You called her a maid. You told your friends we married down. You told me my wife's family wasn't good enough. Beverly looked at her lap. And you know what Diane did? Marcus leaned forward. She showed up at your door every morning at 8 o'clock. She fed you. She bathed you. She caught a pressure sore before it got infected. She ran therapy on your hand until you could hold a cup. And 2 days ago, she identified a mini stroke in 90 seconds and saved you from losing your voice forever. He paused. Beverly's right hand was gripping the wheelchair arm. Her left hand, the one Diane had exercised every day, was trembling. I should have stopped you a long time ago, Marcus said. I didn't. That's on me. But this ends now. Diane is family, not because of me and Joanna, because of what she's done. Beverly didn't speak. For the first time in my husband's memory, his mother had no rebuttal, no tears, no victim speech. She just sat there, looking at the hand that Diane Thornton had taught to move again. Week 8, a Tuesday morning. Diane arrived at the usual time. Beverly was in the kitchen, not the bedroom, the kitchen. She was sitting at the table in her wheelchair, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. And in front of this empty chair across from her sat a second mug. Steam rising. Diane set her bag down, looked at the tea, looked at Beverly. Beverly's voice was slow, careful, every word costing effort. Diane, I owe you. She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. At that dinner, what I said. Beverly stared at the mug. I knew what I was doing. I wanted everyone at that table to see that I was above you. Her chin trembled. And now you're the reason I can hold this cup. Diane pulled out the chair, sat down, picked up the mug and took a sip. She didn't rush. She didn't prompt. She gave Beverly the same thing she gives every patient. Time. I didn't come here for an apology, Beverly. Diane set the mug down. I came here because this is what I do. I take care of people, even the ones who don't think I'm worth much. Beverly cried. Not the performative tears she'd used on Marcus over the phone, not the victim cry, the strategy cry. This was the cry of a woman sitting across from the person she'd tried to diminish and realizing, with the clarity that only helplessness can provide, that she'd been wrong about the most basic thing, the value of another human being's work. Diane didn't hug her. She didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. She sat there. She drank her tea. And after a while, she placed her hand flat on the table, not reaching, just resting. Beverly placed her hand on top of Diane's, slowly, with the left hand, the one that couldn't move 8 weeks ago. That was enough. They sat at that table for another hour. Diane told me about it later. Not everything, and just the parts she thought I should hear. Beverly told her about Gerald, Marcus's father, a plumber who worked with his hands every day for 35 years and never once complained about the work. What Beverly didn't talk about, what she'd hidden from everyone in Millbrook for 3 decades, was where she came from before Gerald. A trailer park outside Fayetteville, a mother who cleaned hotel rooms, a father who left when Beverly was 6, free lunch at school, clothes from church donation bins, the kind of childhood you spend the rest of your life trying to outrun. When I saw you at that dinner, Beverly told Diane, proud of your work, wearing that pretty dress, talking about your patients like they mattered, I saw everything I'd spent 30 years running from. She wiped her eyes with the back of her right hand. I didn't humiliate you, Diane. I was trying to humiliate the part of myself I can't get rid of, and you were standing right there. Diane listened. She didn't nod. She didn't say, I understand. She said what she meant. I hear that, Beverly. And I'm sorry about your childhood. But you hurt me. In front of people I respect. That doesn't go away because you explain it. Beverly nodded. I know. And I wasn't ashamed. Not at that dinner, not at the barbecue, not once in 27 years. Diane paused. The only person at that table who was ashamed of blue-collar work was you. Beverly flinched. A small one, but real. But I'm still going to take care of you, Diane said. Because that part doesn't change. She stood up, rinsed both mugs in the sink, and pulled on her gloves. Ready for therapy? Beverly wiped her face. Ready. News travels in a small town the way water travels through limestone, slowly, quietly, and into every crack. Aunt Carolyn told the book club, not to gossip, to correct the record. The woman Beverly called a maid at the rehearsal dinner is the same woman who caught a mini-stroke and saved Beverly's life. She's been there every morning at 8 for 2 months. The book club told their families. The families told the neighborhood. By mid-July, half of Millbrook knew the story. Beverly's neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, stopped Diane in the driveway one afternoon. You're the one who caught the TIA? I am. My husband has high blood pressure and diabetes. Could you check on him sometime? Just a quick visit? Diane gave her a Crestview card. At the grocery store, Marlene, Beverly's closest friend, sent the woman who'd laughed at the rehearsal dinner and again at the barbecue, found Diane in the produce section. Diane. Marlene held a bag of apples like a shield. I owe you an apology. I laughed when Beverly said those things. Both times. I shouldn't have. I was wrong. Diane looked at her. Thank you for saying that, Marlene. She's lucky to have you. She's lucky to be alive. Those are different things. Crestview picked up 12 new client referrals in the Tri-County area over the next 2 months. Families calling and asking for The aide who saved that woman's life. Ruth Calloway submitted Diane's name for the State Caregiver of the Year award. Beverly heard the talk. For the first time in her life, the public narrative was moving without her hand on the wheel. She couldn't edit it. She couldn't rephrase it. Yet she couldn't host a dinner party and redirect the conversation. She told Carolyn, "She deserved better from me." It was the truest sentence Beverly Ashford had spoken in 30 years. June. 4 months after the stroke. Beverly could walk with a walker. She could eat solid food. She could speak in full sentences, though some words still took a second try. Her left arm had 80% range of motion. Diane's assignment was ending. Crestview would transition Beverly to a maintenance caregiver for the remaining physical therapy. Someone competent, someone fine, but not Diane. The last day was a Friday. Diane arrived at 8, ran vitals, did a final round of therapy, and spent an hour writing a transfer report so detailed the incoming aide would know Beverly's exact preferences. Tea at 9, not 9:30, blinds open first thing, a left heel checked twice daily. At 3:45, Diane packed her bag, wiped down the blood pressure cuff, tucked the notebook into the side pocket. Beverly stood at the front door, standing, with her walker, yes, but standing, in the doorway of her own house, on her own feet, watching the woman she once dismissed walk across her living room one last time. "I don't have the right words, Diane." "You don't need the right words." Diane snapped the bag shut. "You just needed to let me do my job." She stopped at the door. They stood face to face, Beverly with her walker, Diane with her medical bag. Two women who'd started this story on opposite sides of a dinner table and ended it on opposite sides of a threshold. "Take your medication," Diane said. "Keep your follow-up appointments. And if you feel any numbness or sudden headaches, that you call 911 first and Marcus second." Beverly nodded. Then she lifted her left arm, the arm that hadn't moved the day Diane walked in, and waved. Diane waved back, walked to her car, set the bag on the passenger seat, started the engine. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. She didn't need to. She knew exactly who she was when she drove in, and she was the same person driving out. Thanksgiving, 5 months after the stroke, 7 months after the rehearsal dinner. The invitation came by mail. Not a text, not a phone call. A card. Cream-colored stock, Beverly's handwriting. Addressed to Diane Thornton. Not Joanna's mother. Not that home health woman. Her name. 15 people around the table. Beverly at the head, standing with one hand on the back of her chair, the other on the table for support. She'd practiced this, as I could tell, the way she shifted her weight, the way she steadied her voice before speaking. "I want to say something," Beverly said. The room went quiet, forks down, eyes up. "Last year at a table like this one, I said something I'm ashamed of, to someone who deserved better than what I gave her." She looked down the table at Diane, who was sitting 3 seats away, not at the end, not by the door, but in the middle, between Marcus and Linda. "Diane, I'm grateful you're at this table, and I'm grateful you were at my door when I needed you most." The room held its breath. Aunt Carolyn wiped her eyes. Marlene, at this dinner by Beverly's invitation, stared at her plate. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. This time, the squeeze meant something different than it had at that rehearsal dinner. This time it meant, "Look what happened. Look what your mother did." Diane straightened her napkin. She looked at Beverly the way she looks at a patient who's just taken their first step after weeks in bed. Not with triumph, not with vindication, but with the quiet acknowledgement that progress is progress, even when it comes late. "Thank you, Beverly," Diane said. "Now pass the potatoes." Laughter. Real laughter. The kind that fills a room from the inside out. It wasn't perfect. Beverly was still Beverly. But that sentence, in front of 15 people, was the public correction that Diane had never asked for, and Beverly had finally chosen to give. I used to think standing up for someone meant fighting, raising your voice, making a scene. telling the room exactly what you think of the person who wronged you and watching them shrink. My mother showed me a different way, and she showed up every morning, 8 o'clock. She packed her bag, drove to the house of the woman who'd humiliated her, and did the job she's been doing for 27 years. She didn't lecture Beverly, she didn't bring up the dinner, she didn't say, "I told you so," when she caught the TIA or when Beverly's hands started moving again. She just worked, and the work spoke for itself, louder than any speech at a rehearsal dinner, louder than any insult at a barbecue, louder than anything Beverly or I or Marcus could have said. Diane Thornton still wakes up at 5 a.m. She still drives to patients' homes. She still checks vitals, runs therapy, changes dressings, and holds hands. She's still the highest-rated caregiver at Crestview Home Care. Nothing about her job has changed, because it never needed to. So what changed was this. The people around her finally caught up to what she already knew. My mother doesn't have a fancy title, she doesn't have a corner office or a gilded frame on the wall, but she has something Beverly Ashford spent 62 years trying to buy and never could: the ability to walk into any room, any house, any situation, and know exactly who she is. She's worth more than anything Beverly ever put on a resume. And the 12 people at that rehearsal dinner? Every single one of them knows it now. If someone in your life has ever been looked down on for what they do, a teacher, a janitor, a cashier, a nurse's aide, a caregiver, tell them about this story. Because what they do matters, even when the world pretends it doesn't. A few months after Thanksgiving, I drove to Mom's house on a Saturday morning, but I had something to tell her. She was in the kitchen, where else? Wiping down the counter after breakfast. The 3-ring binder was on the table again, open to a new certification module. She never stops learning. She never has. "Mom, sit down." She looked at me, read my face the way she reads a patient's chart, quickly, accurately. "You're pregnant. How did you—" "Joanna, I've been reading people for 27 years. Sit down before you fall down." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd watched her cry through the window the night before my wedding. This time, she cried for a different reason. She held both my hands, and tears rolled down her face, and she laughed at the same time, the way only mothers can. "This baby," she said, wiping her eyes, is going to know what hard work looks like. This baby is going to know what dignity looks like, because of you." She squeezed my hands, held them the way she holds a patient's hands during therapy, firm, warm, certain. The next morning, I imagined her routine: 5 a.m. alarm, coffee, scrubs, medical bag by the door, 40-minute drive to a new patient's house. Vitals check, medication, therapy, lunch, more therapy, documentation, home by 5, dinner alone, study for the next certification, sleep, repeat. 27 years and counting. That's my mother, Diane Thornton. Home health aide. She doesn't clean up after people for money. She holds their lives together when no one else will. She walks into houses where she's needed and sometimes where she's not wanted. And then she does her job with a level of skill and grace that most people will never see because they're too busy looking the other way. And if anyone at any dinner, anywhere, ever asks what my mother does for a living, I'll be the one who answers first this time. That's my story, my mother's story. If you know someone who's ever been looked down on because of their job, a caregiver, a janitor, a teacher, a cashier, send them this video. They need to know someone sees them. And if you've ever been Beverly, if you've ever judged someone for what they do before understanding what it actually takes, that's okay too. Growth doesn't have a deadline. If you liked how this ended, not with yelling, not with revenge, but with showing up every single day and doing the work, then subscribe. And then check the description for more stories like this one. I'm Joanna. Thank you for being here.